Why doesn't anybody, when it comes to getting like a lesson from cinema, why doesn't anybody look at Forrest Gump the way, like, when the girl was somewhat pure, she's like, I gotta go out and I gotta run the streets, and then when she comes back all used up, fucked a bunch of dudes, did a bunch of drugs, she's
has
like, all right,
has AIDS.
I know you're
like,
a
Spider-Man.
Wait,
she died of AIDS in that movie, not cancer?
Something like that.
HIV.
Yeah, it was HIV. Dude, he was just in love with like a fucked up hoe.
Spider-Man's one of them. Peter Parker was
because he was slow, he's like, okay, like she comes back to me now finally.
Okay,
I don't care.
And everybody, it's just it's love conquers all.
I'm sorry. What's your better cinema example?
One. You want a horror story, a horror movie? Watch Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh my god!
The dude dresses up like a bitch just to be able to see his kids.
And there's a rich dude.
Yeah.
And it gets worse. It was Robin Williams who who portrayed the role.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually thought about that. There's several things that I look at through a red pill lens now, and that was one of them. I was like, wow.
Don't go back and watch that with a red pill lens. You will like tear your eye. You'll
like,
gouge your eyes out after that movie.
Have you seen all the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans?
Yeah.
So like from the first Spider-Man to the third, Mary Jane has been with like 5 different dudes from Queens, and if I was Peter Parker, like at this point, I'm like, I don't even want this anymore. Like
Spider-Man.
I tell you one thing. That is kind of like another funny example of like everybody likes Spider-Man. We grow up on superheroes, and Mary Jane is like the typical hoe that like she gets with the nerdy guy, and like she becomes more attracted to him
with his best friend.
Once she or I think she doesn't start fucking him until she finds out that he's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But then also later in the series, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, once Spider-Man has got this like big appeal and everybody in New York City loves him, then it becomes this thing where Mary Jane's no longer just happy to be with a superhero. She's like, oh, it's always about Spider-Man, huh? It's like, well, what did you want, Batman? Like, what does it for you?
It's like a superhero terms of hypergamy. It's like hyperpower.
That's pretty realistic for fantasy.
Because I think there's this want to sort of convert beta male guys like Spider-Man, for example, into alpha males. Really, if you look at like the story of Captain America, and really Peter Parker too, but like Captain America, he goes from being that wimpy kid who gets declared, he couldn't join the army, right? Back in the 40s, right? He couldn't join the war because he had flat feet, or he was too skinny or whatever, too scrawny or whatever. And then so the fantasy is going from being completely powerless to being super powered,
having all
right?
of it.
Put him in the can and the super chamber, give him the super sauce, and he comes out and he looks like Chris Evans, right? And so, but now he still has the mentality of the beta male, blue pill, good guy, right? He's got to do everything right because now I have the power to do all the things I wanted to do because I'm a good guy, right? And that, I think, is it's certainly a beta male fantasy. And Peter Parker's the same thing. He gets bit by the radioactive spider, but he's still a teenage kid and he doesn't get it. And
to
he's just
use
like,
alpha male power for beta purposes.
And women think that's what they want. They think that's the guy.
And they think it's
he's
endearing.
Sweet.
Yeah.
But he's also...
Yeah, there's so much of it in the culture. Would you say, in terms of... well, actually, you know what this conversation leads into? I've been talking about a lot. Have you noticed what's happened in the culture? I might have mentioned it to you. Is we recognize now that the new villains of society are going to be increasingly more incel, introverted,
like
feeling shunned from society because the villains are no longer, and cinema acknowledges this, the villains are no longer Bane, the big, the strong, the unstoppable. It's the little nerdy science tech guy is like the new terrorist.
Think of like the terrorist aspect of when in Joker, who played Joker that died, Heath Ledger. So that's when like all the terrorist shit was really big and like frequent. Now since it's like school shooters, that's what they're morphing into now.
And now it's Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, right?
Yep.
Is that what?
Yeah, he's the current Joker.
And current Joker. And if you watch that, that's just the story of an incel.
Yeah,
that's all it is. The
Literally.
incel gets his revenge.
That movie is very uncomfortable because the movie kind of tries to persuade you into like rooting for the incel, but then you end up rooting for a murderer who's murdering people because he never felt loved and had a weird relationship with his mother. So that movie makes people very uncomfortable. It made me very uncomfortable.
That's because it's based on feels before reels. That's why. Because it's the feels. It translates into like classic kind of story arcs, like even the hero's journey. It's no longer about like Luke Skywalker. It's about, well, he's this way because his mom didn't love him enough when he was a child. And so there always has to be some kind of emotional damage to the hero or the villain that we have that's unresolved. And so if we would just have loved him more, or hugged him more, or kissed him more, or his dad wasn't such a prick, and boys don't cry, that kind of shit. If that hadn't happened to him, then he wouldn't be the Joker.
And let me just say real quick, because I want more input that you have on that. Real quick, notice the contrast between this Joker and the last Joker, which was Heath Ledger. conquer the world, fuck society. It never really made sense. I'm the good guy in my eyes.
His Joker was an anarchist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Joker,
and now
this Joker is an incel.
Yeah, and it's for where we're at in society right now, it's very relatable. But isn't it uncomfortable to know that an incel who murders people because he never felt loved is so culturally relatable right now?
He's an anti-hero, though. He's not even really the villain of it. He's the star of the movie. I mean, he's Batman-wise, he's the villain. Imagine like Batman coming up and saying, "Okay, incel Joker, here I am to give you your vigilante justice." Who are you rooting for? Are you rooting for Batman, or are you rooting for Joker to like kick Batman's ass?
And it's so crazy that Batman has the other dynamic of like the hypergamy. He's loaded.
Yeah.
He gets all the
he's
women.
got
The car.
He's a maverick. He's a dark knight. In fact, he's the worst kind of alpha because if you look at like Captain America and you look at like Iron Man, both alpha, but they're different archetypes of alpha. So you look at Captain America and he's the pro-social alpha. Believes in God and country and says yes ma'am, no ma'am, and has that old country boy kind of like old school aesthetic to him that makes him sort of like Superman, like truth, justice, and the American way, right? It's very pro-social, very alpha, still looks good. You know, I want to touch his chest, right? That kind of shit. Like maybe he'll fuck me, but only me, right? But then there's Iron Man, who is also alpha, has a shit ton of money, is cocky, funny, amused mastery up the yin yang. And at least in the first couple of Iron Man movies, he's like fucking the reporter and whoever else. Like he's spinning plates until, of course, Pepper Potts comes in, and that tames the alpha. By the way, that's a female fantasy.
Absolutely.
As Jane tames Tarzan, and so but those are two different alpha archetypes in their own, standalone from the plot, right? They're two archetypes. There's the pro-social alpha and there's the anti-alpha or the anti-social alpha. And Batman is, like I would say, is the anti-social alpha. He's the maverick. He's the Dark Knight. He's still a good guy, and he's still alpha very much, but like he does things his own way. And he's like, guys will say, well, he's a Sigma. Well, you guys need to go watch Vox Day's sociosexual hierarchies before you bring that out. He's just an anti-social alpha. And that's pretty, if you want to talk about Sigma, okay, that's an anti-social alpha.
Yeah.
And when I look at whenever I describe those two between women, I say, which one do you want to marry and which one do you want to fuck? And it's always they want to marry Captain America and they want to fuck Iron Man. And that's it's what alpha does that woman have use for at that particular time in her life. So if you ask women who are, I don't know, like 30, 31, 32 years old, they're going to probably pick Captain America. Or maybe for a one night stand or a fling or something, they might pick Iron Man, but like for the long term, they're looking for a pro-social alpha.
And never Spider-Man.
And never
much.
Well, that's good because that's a good example because Spider-Man is a fake alpha. He's a paper tiger. He's a paper alpha is what he is because he's using alpha male. Like he suddenly has alpha male superpowers, but he hasn't killed the beta.
And that's why Mary Jane used to say, "Go get him, Tiger."
Yeah.
Pretty much. While we're getting into this, let me intro it because I've been meaning to do this with you. Obi-Wan. Let me just tell you real quick. The new Obi-Wan Star Wars.
Where's John MLD when I need him?
The only reason I watched it is because I grew up on the Obi-Wans, or I grew up on the Obi-Wan of the what would you say, the prequel trilogy. Okay, and I wanted to see Darth Vader in modern times again and in Star Wars again. I don't watch The Mandalorian and I don't watch any of the spin-offs.
Mandalorian's good.
Yeah, but I didn't watch any of the spin-offs. I was like, there's 6 Star Wars movies. I'm sticking to it. The new 3 blew, and then I was like, okay, but Obi-Wan is back from the Star Wars movies I grew up with. I'm like, okay, and Darth Vader's in it. So the modern Obi-Wan versus the Darth Vader as we knew it.
Leave it perfect.
Well, right. But anyways, I'm watching Obi-Wan and I'm getting into it. I'm like, okay, it's cool. But as I'm watching it, I'm getting uncomfortable with something about the aspect of the show. And I notice, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that it's Obi-Wan assisted by a child version of Princess Leia, which is like, okay, she's really smart. She gets some attention because it's supposed to be like Leia was, this incredible goddess in Star Wars. Okay, fine. And I do think that there's something really sweet about like a man, like, taking care of a young girl, almost like a daughter figure, especially if it's Princess Leia. So I like the connection there. But generally, you have Obi-Wan going after Darth Vader with all this only female assistance. And I realized I'm watching this. I'm like, what do I like hate women? Do I hate the fact that there's like this many women in the show? And then I realized
it's not believable.
It's not believable, and 2, it is a vehicle for not only a woke narrative, but these female characters. And as I've always said, there's nothing wrong with tough female characters, but can they get their own series instead of Obi-Wan, which is supposed to be about the character Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, the original characters that we love, just being a vehicle for the stories of the new female characters? That's what I don't like. And even outside of feminism and woke narratives in film, this is something that Chinese martial arts movies used to do. What they would do is they would get like Sylvester Stallone or like Jason Statham or a wrestler from America in one scene or two scenes of a Chinese martial art film. That's it. They're only in two scenes, but then they would brand it as, say, Stallone or Batista or Jason Statham was the star of the movie.
Yeah.
Then you find out they were just the star power vehicle for these Chinese martial artists that aren't as popular in America.
To pull in that audience.
And so I realized that, you know, even though, like, yeah, the black chick in Star Wars, she was dope, but why can't she have her own series versus her taking up so much time away from Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, which is why we came for the nostalgia factor.
But what's easier to pull women into this series they want people to watch? Would you rather have a show dedicated to women and you want to try to, like,
yes,
get women?
leave Obi-Wan and Darth Vader for the guys.
No, I know, but listen,
no one would watch it.
But as a market, would you rather try to pull women into a Star Wars thing that's about women, or would you rather have the nerdy dude in the house put on Star Wars and then she starts liking it because all these women characters? It pulls another
What's your
market
take?
in.
All right, so I think first of all, it's a money grab. That's number
Absolutely.
one. So let's what Disney and really Marvel and Star Wars and Lucasfilm, it's milking a dead cow, and anything that they can do as a spinoff right now is fair game. The problem I have with most old school franchises, whether that's Marvel, which by the way is now completely corrupted, or Star Wars, is that they're relying on the nostalgia factor of those franchises to pitch the narrative that is now the woke / feminist / gynocentric narrative, right? We're supposed to like it. It's like, open your mouth and we're going to shove this down your fucking throat no matter what you know, and it'll taste better because it's Star Wars, right? They did the same thing, by the way, with Dune as well. Like, I'm a big fan of Dune. I've read the book like God knows how many times, and I wanted to see how well they were going to do it because the one in the 80s was just an abortion. But this one is good. I'm glad they got Timothée Chalamet as the character, but like they're already trying to make Shani, who's just like his starts out as girlfriend and later on wife. He's got concubines, by the way. It's really based on like sort of like almost an Islamic kind of science fiction kind of thing. They don't touch that in the book, not at all. We can't go there, but. But what they do is they take classic franchises and then they attach like a woke narrative to them, because no one will go and watch a movie that is just the black chick that is the Sith girl from Star Wars. If it was just about this new character that they made up, and she's the Imperial Inquisitor assistant to Darth Vader, and she had a standalone movie, nobody would.
No one would
care. No one. You'll notice that there's very few original, especially sci-fi or fantasy franchises these days, and the reason for that is because we go back to nostalgia factor, because we need that to sell to Gen X and to even millennials too, I guess. But we need it to be at least broadly appealing, but at the same time, like places like, or I said, movie creators like Disney or whatever will take a loss on a movie if it's still cramming the narrative down your throat.
100%.
When you look at like Captain Marvel, for example, worst flop that Marvel has ever produced, and they produced some really good shit.
Did that actually
man.
financially flop? That
Oh
one?
yeah,
absolutely.
It was.
It was horrible.
It was flopped so badly that they had to go and rejigger the numbers on like Rotten Tomatoes so that they could make it look as if it was. And that's when I gave up on Rotten Tomatoes as a rating system, metric.
No credibility.
There's no credibility to them anymore. But now here's the thing. And you'll see this with She-Hulk. This is going to come up because She-Hulk is releasing
the
like
trailer.
this week.
Yeah. I didn't even know about
She-Hulk
that.
is actually a very classic Avengers character,
Yeah.
but they're going to turn her into female empowerment girl.
Yeah.
Feminist Hulk.
And then like Captain Marvel, she's just a Mary Sue, and they couldn't have picked a worse actress to be the Captain Marvel. What's Brie Larson? Brie Larson. Yeah. And that was intentional, okay? Because
the
now,
short hair.
So here's the market. The marketing is this: we're going to produce this piece of nostalgia that we're going to cram all this woke narrative into and all this female empowerment into, and if you don't like it, you're a misogynist. Oh, it flopped because all these red pill guys got together and let's downvote it, the whole thing. And so that's so predictable now that they know that if it flops, they can always say, well, it's those guys in the manosphere. It's those guys who are downvoting it. It's say, you must be something wrong with you. Are you threatened by strong, independent female characters and stuff? It's like, no, it just sucks.
Just don't want to watch it.
It just sucks.
Yeah, but
your writing sucks, your plot sucks, and you're not only that, it sucks because you ruined a classic character that all these guys are probably familiar with through their childhood, and because you wanted to insert and use that character and that narrative and that plot and all that storyline as a vehicle for the bullshit that you would have to go and create a brand new character and a brand new movie about that goddamn well would never sell.